Abu Ali Abdur Rahman. Ron Cawthon. Gary Cohn. Akil Jahi. Donald Middlebrooks. Harold Wayne Nichols. Derek Quintero.
Please go ahead.
Yes, my name is Derek Quintero. My thing is justice delayed is justice, denied. It seems like my whole life has revolved around trying to find a way to express to others who I am. Now I have been placed on death row, and my struggle for understanding continues with attorneys who struggle to represent who I am to the courts and the public at large. Their dilemma seems to be how to represent an innocent man who has 3 escapes and a long history of implied and expressed opinions against authority dating back to the early 1970s when I was a youth. My understanding of political activism began when I rode around with my papa in his 1961 Chevy panel van with the people's candidates painted on boards strapped to the van's outside walls. We'd ride around in the trailer parks, papa honking horn, and I'd try to tower down into the seat and telling me to get up, that I had a First Amendment right and responsibility. Pop had much to say about my rights and my obligations under the First Amendment to stand up for the working class against the abuses of big businesses and government. Pop at 84 still has a lot to say. Now, as opposed to in my youth, I contribute to the conversation rather than just absorbing Papa's wisdom. Papa has influenced my worldview, but now I am my own being. My worldview is shaped and formed and has resulted in who I am now. There is an old creaky bridge in Oak Grove, Kentucky, where I lived for most of my youth. The locals called it Ghost Bridge. The folklore portrays 5 black people being hung from it. Who knows the real truth? But in the area where it is, and during the period it was to have occurred, it could possibly be true. All I know is that it was true. That if it was true, their cries for justice have still yet to be heard. I never did hear any of the 5 people's cries on the full moon nights from that bridge. We used to go down there every once in a while, and that was while we went down there when we was younger, at nighttime, to hear if we could hear the voices in the wind.
The only way that we're able to make any recordings of the guys when we go visit, well, we're not allowed when we visit. We're not allowed to record audio or video. So fortunately, was able to arrange for Derek and a couple of the guys to call a phone number and just leave a recorded message over a telephone. And that's how we were able to obtain these recording messages. Derek tells several stories in his message. And this is a map that Derek gave to me when we started talking about the Ghost Bridge. The Ghost Bridge is a place near where Derek grew up. The footage that you're seeing here is actually of the Ghost Bridge in Kentucky. And we traveled there and shot some footage for him of the Ghost Bridge. And this was a place in his youth that was very, very important to him growing up, and a place that he not only remembers fondly, but also sees as a moment where he first realized the potential of his role as an activist in getting to know people in his community who were not being affected by the racism and the different things that were happening within the community at large, but he and his friends seemed to operate free from this. So he was kind enough to draw me a handwritten map of how to find this place, because it's sort of in the middle of nowhere. Mary Mae Jansen is a woman who I met that is a close friend of Gary Cohn, who's one of the guys at River Bend. And Mary Mae has known Gary for, I believe, a little over 13 years. And she was kind enough to allow me to come to her home and spend about 5 hours with me, telling me stories about Gary. They've been in correspondence over the course of these 13 years. They've been writing letters back and forth to one another over the course of this time. And over the course of those 5 hours, of course, time passed, and we got more and more comfortable, and I felt really fortunate at just the degree to which she was willing to share with me about Gary and his life and what she knows of Gary. Gary, earlier this year, seemed in pretty good health, and almost out of the blue, over the course of a couple of weeks, he lost his mobility in the lower part of his body, and was taken from River Bend Maximum Security Prison and was moved to a hospital facility, a care facility that the prison system has in Nashville, where he's been ever since. And at the time in which I visited with Mary Mae, she was a couple of months after this had transpired, and she had at that point when we first met, she actually had not seen him in a couple of months, because once he was moved to this facility, she wasn't allowed to visit him. And then shortly thereafter, actually in the process of working on this project, she was able to go and visit him. And she called me actually the day that she was going in to visit with Gary for the first time in a couple of months. And I felt really fortunate to be part of that process, and to not only have that time with her, but to have several conversations with her after the fact, after she had been able to go back and visit with Gary after a couple of months, and having not been able to spend any time with him. And so I just want to tell you a couple stories that she related to me. One of the things that Mary Mae and Gary have done is, in an attempt to provide one another acts of support and relationship as friends, and to have some sort of a relationship that is of more substance than what two people normally can have through correspondence. They engaged in letter writing and storytelling and traveling in storytelling. So what Mary Mae and Gary have done on several occasions is they decide on a destination to travel to, and they decide that they're going to go to the beach or to the mountains for the summer. And they're both storytellers and writers, and they correspond in these letters with one another, where Mary Mae will explain this trip that they're taking to the beach and talk about it, and then send that letter to Gary, which will be highly detailed, and then maybe Gary responds with a painting or a drawing of them on the beach. And this goes back and forth, and these stories build. And for them, this allows them to some degree, even if only in their imagination, to transcend the walls of the space that Gary's confined to. And for allow them to have a relationship that is not limited to the relationship that they normally have, which is one of them on one side of the glass and Mary May on one side and Gary on the other. So this is one of the main ways that they correspond and are able to transcend this. Beyond that, they do things like exchanging photographs, exchanging pictures with one another that they find, clippings. Another thing is that over the course of time, they, as they become closer, they have developed a correspondence that is consistent enough where Mary May even makes calendars that has the dates in which they will send letters to one another, the dates in which they will have phone calls, and the days in which they'll be able to visit. And one of the most amazing things to me is that there's this entire wonderful bookcase in Mary May's apartment that is filled with these giant 3-ring binders that have all of the letters and correspondence that they have had over the course of these 13 years. And so one of the things that we did is when we were together was she actually spent time filing away these letters, because she'll allow them to pile up, and then after she has half a dozen or so, she'll file them away, and she keeps the envelopes that they come in, and everything that comes in the envelope, because he may have added some pictures or something and some additional information. She'll keep all that and separate it for each letter that he's sent to her. And this is one of the things that she shared with me when we were together. This is actually a moment where Mary May is talking about going to Cheekwood Gardens, which is a botanical gardens and residence, museum and residence for exhibitions in Nashville. And Gary had always wanted to go to this place. And so she actually went and spent time there and took photographs of Cheekwood and the gardens there. And then she even had a friend Photoshop her and Gary into the photograph from Cheekwood. And then she sent him a letter back with the photographs of Cheekwood and then a photograph with the two of them photoshopped together in the photograph there at Cheekwood. Brittany has a text that Abu Ali has written about his time earlier in his life when he had essentially got to a point when he was in prison. This is not being in prison now, but an earlier time when he was first in prison, and things had gotten for him a little bit. They were being a little bit more lax with his supervision because he was a good prisoner, and he was near the end of his service, and he was allowed to go out on these work programs. And one day he decided that he would just walk away. Nobody was paying attention, and he did. He just walked away, and he got on a Greyhound bus, and he went to the Black Hills. And Abu Ali actually went into the Black Hills and really became friends and joined in a community of Native Americans that were living there in Abu Ali in the Black Hills. And Abu Ali himself is Native American. And for him, this was possibly the most wonderful time in his life. The reason that Abu Ali was in what had entered prison in this first visit was something that first became but he came into prison the first time, and over the course of that time, things got more and more complicated. He was a very young man when he first entered prison, and so he went through a great deal of abuse. Linda Manning is a friend of mine and a friend of Abu Ali's, who is Abu Ali's spiritual advisor. And she's been visiting him for a long time, I believe almost 12 years as well. And that relationship is built in trust is over the course of time, where they've really been able to talk about Abu Ali and his life prior to coming to prison, and how he wound up there in the first place, and how how things have changed for him since over the course of the years that he's been there. Abu Ali has been in a maximum security prison in some form of solitary confinement for over 25 years. And he's been on death row throughout this time. And when he went to the Black Hills, he had this moment that really became this turning point in his life. Maybe for the very first time, he understood what it was that he was looking for that he did not have earlier in his life. Because what he did not have earlier in his life is support in family, and community, and relationships. Where Abu Ali found that support was in nature. Abu Ali would actually run away from home as a very young man as a means of survival. And he would go into the woods and find friends in nature. And he became very close to animals and to nature. Linda Manning even talks about moments where Abu Ali talks about actually being cold and afraid and being in the woods and leaning up against the tree and feeling the tree hug him. And this is the level of intimacy and connection that Abu Ali has with nature. And so when he had this opportunity to actually go to the Black Hills, what he had was this relationship that started in nature and started with animals and then for the very first time grew into his relationships with a community of people. And he became an integral part of that community. And for 9 months he was there, rooted in that community and playing a fundamental role in that community. Eventually, he went into town to help a young man who had been arrested from the community. And when he did that, he was caught and arrested and returned to prison. But those 9 months to this very day are very much the template for him of what he knows to be a good life and a true life, and what he desires if he's ever given the opportunity to leave prison. He would love one day, if he were so fortunate to find himself in Asheville, North Carolina, fishing, having a cabin, being able to be close to the land again.
I'm going to read 3 poems written by Akil. Dreams of having another chance to see a different morning and cherish the night of freedom, to embrace it like a child with the knowledge of the past, truly knowing what's right and wrong. Allow my words to live even after I am gone. Oh, these poems have no title. Would we be more receptive as people if we only heard a voice? No different gender, race, or religion. At what point our lives do we step out of our shoes, flesh into the realization of how it affects our humanity as a whole? Breath, then life, a journey unknown, but with a purpose, to uncover, to evolve and exist beyond ethical boundaries. Educator, visionary, to accept failure, to excel into solidarity.
When this project first started, the conversation that we had at Riverbend Maximum Security Prison was based on an initial concept that eventually fell apart, but over the course of time became something much different. But one essence of that idea that remained throughout the project was, initially we thought it would be wonderful if we could have multiple people come into the prison and spend time one-on-one with the guys, and so that each guy at Riverbend would have an opportunity to sit one-on-one with someone and tell a story of meaning to that person, and then that person would receive that story and live with that story. And over the course of time, in living with that story, it would become their own, and they would retell that story. And then the collaboration was furthered in conversations about how these stories are retold. And unfortunately, only so many people were able to go in. And so we ended up taking multiple paths, like you've seen these recordings on audio of the guys, persons that they designated to tell their stories. And then a few of us were able to actually go in and hear stories firsthand. And I was fortunate enough to spend an evening with Harold Wayne Nichols, where he shared with me a story about his upbringing, and I want to share that with you. When I was 10 years old, my mother passed away. She died from breast cancer. It was around Christmas. And I remember it really well because my birthday is in December. And between my birthday and Christmas, I spent most of that time in the hospital watching my mother suffer. And it's strange because that's actually probably the one thing I remember most about my mother, is how much she suffered during that time. That's a difficult and interesting thing, that's the most consistent memory you have of your mother, is her suffering. She passed away in January, turned 10, December. She passed away in January. It's 1971. And that left me and my sister Deborah and our dad. And our dad was abusive. And I don't need to go into any details, but he did things that no dad should ever do to his children. And Deborah and I found ourselves in a strange situation. Fortunately, someone from a local church decided to reach out and help us, and they really did. And if it wasn't for them, I'm not sure what we would have done. Deborah was the person who always took care of me when Mom was sick. And she's how I got through things. Sue Puryear this woman from the church that really took care of us. And after maybe a couple of months, she actually suggested that we become part of a contest that me and my sister get involved in raising money for charity for this local orphanage. And the local orphanage got their Christmas presents every year through raising S&H green stamps. And they decided that they'd have a big contest and get people to raise S&H green stamps and send them in to the orphanage so that they would have more S&H green stamps for Christmas presents. And in order to get everybody excited about this, especially kids, they were going to offer a grand prize, which was a bicycle. And I really wanted this bicycle. It was amazing. And Superior even got us on the morning news show and to let everyone know about this contest. And it really worked because I was getting books and packages and boxes of S&H green stamps and spending all this time licking these stamps and filling these books, and it turned out I won the bicycle. And it was this amazing green flake bicycle with a great banana seat and a T-shifter right in the middle, and had this great sissy bar on the backside. And I love that thing. I cruised everywhere in that bicycle through the neighborhood. So about the time this was happening, we were getting to know Sue really well, and my sister actually got up the courage to finally tell Sue what was going on with our dad about the abuse. And really quickly, the church got involved, and the state got involved, and somehow, I don't really know the details, but it was reduced to one of two options. Either our dad would go away to jail, or we would be given the opportunity to go live with a family. Well, unfortunately, for us, the only family that we could go and live with was with my uncle and my aunt, and neither one of them believed us about the abuse. So we were sent to the local orphanage. And this is all still 1971. So Christmas 1971, my sister and I are actually in the orphanage that we had raised S&H green stamps for, getting our presents for Christmas with the S&H green stamps that we had helped raise. I did get to keep the bike for a while, though. I had it through 1972 till there was a big flood. And I remember I'd always lock it up really well outside, and I'd heard that it was going to be a bad storm, and I asked the house parent at the orphanage if I could go outside and get my bike, and he wouldn't let me. And so I asked him if he would go and get it, and he said he wasn't going out in the storm. So I actually sat there crying and looking out the window at my bicycle as it was slowly ripped from the post and washed away. My uncle was one who didn't believe us. It was very fortunate. I hope and think for both of us. My father went to live with him years later, and things started happening with my uncle's children and my uncle's wife. So one day he showed up to see me in prison many years later, and he said, I just want to let you know, I know it doesn't matter in a lot of ways now, because I can't change the past, but I was wrong, and your aunt was wrong, and I can't take it back, but I'm sorry, and I would do anything to change it, and I'm sorry. And for that, I can't tell you what that meant to me.
Ron Cowthorne.
I'm going to read 3 more of Akil's poems. Flatlined, couldn't breathe, then drunkenness falls upon you, blindsided by countless moments of nostalgia. It can rip you apart, who dares to mend? Go, stay at naught, thou bitterness has ruined me, waxed face, shattered pictures, disfigured hearts. Here comes the rain, pounding. Oh no, no more letters, no more poems. Could this be my last prose? This one is called Ricochet. In life, there are many risks we'll take. Removing someone's thorns will always create a warm smile upon your face.
Daryl Middlebrooks. Sorry, I said Daryl. Donald Middlebrooks. Donald, Donald told his story to Robin Paris, who is one of the people that's been going in for a long time now, the project. And he also first told her a story about his childhood, and then over the course of several weeks, told her additional stories. And then she, similar to the situation with Wayne, Harold Wayne Nichols, she actually kind of lived with it for a little while and then sat down in an attempt to write out what she remembered from that time they spent together when he was telling her his story to her. And this text is from that writing. When I was 13 years old, my mother came into my room and she said that she had a birthday present for me. We were poor. She then shot me up with heroin. That was my birthday present. He was good to me and played games that I can still remember. One was hiding pennies, and I would look. I knew that I wanted to get out. When I came home, I would hug them so much. I think I would have worked as a roofer. I was good at that. I tried to protect her. So I told my mother that I would do it. Not for Christmas or any birthday. I labeled it my birth person. I couldn't call her mother. Another idea I had was watching TV. I keep that picture of her so that I can remember to forgive her. I wanted to know what it One day a man did pick me up. I think that it was. He picked up, and I wanted. I don't think I ever learned what love was. broke into my neighbor's at night before she went to sleep. I decided one day, for them, he died when I was 3 years old. Whole life, as best she could, to put them in, I took them home, and at night before she went to sleep, I decided one day, and she married my father. He was good. So much I think I would have worked as a roofer. Wounded, she nursed him back to health. He would leave her. My grandmother stopped her before it could take place. She found he stopped, got back in his van, and drove away. I think he was getting what he house and put my fingerprints all over the windows for my mother. The table and the vase and the flowers shattered on the floor. I decided then I couldn't love her. I tried all kinds of things. If there is one thing that I wanted in my life, it was a family, a wife, kids that would greet me when I came home, and I would hug them. I was good at that. One last thing I want to share tonight is I spoke of Linda Manning earlier, the woman who is and has been a spiritual advisor to Abu Ali for years now, and a good friend to him. And one of the things that I had no idea about until I had gone to visit her that the first time to record her telling stories, she's a professor and an educator and a therapist, and she teaches a class in trauma, and it's one of her specialties. And she decided after some time getting to really know Abu Ali well that she wanted to start taking her students to the prison to meet with Abu Ali. She thought there was probably no one better to teach them about trauma than Abu Ali. And over the years, she's done this on numerous occasions, and it's been a really wonderful experience both for her and for the students and for Abu Ali. And maybe these are not Abu Ali's words. This is Linda thinking about Abu Ali and what she knows of him. But she relayed to me that she feels like the one thing that he is not able to do in the situation that he most longs to do is to have a voice. and to be able to just share his experiences. Because more so than anything, he simply doesn't want anyone to wind up in the situation that he's in. And if there's anything that he could do to contribute to a conversation where someone would actually maybe listen to him and his life experience, then he wants to be able to do that. And that made a lot of sense to me. He's got a lot more clout than I do in that conversation. And he, for the very first time, was able to speak to young people who are forming their ideas about life in the world, and was able to share his experiences with them and to talk about what he knows of trauma and how he's dealt with it, how he's coped with it. So over 25 years in prison, and he's explaining how he copes with trauma. And Linda says that every time she does this class and she has that opportunity to take the kids there, I'm saying kids because I'm old, but the kids, and there, it never fails to amaze her, the questions that group comes away with. And so for me, after spending time with Linda that day, I was left wondering about the potential of that scenario played out in other situations. What if these guys were given an opportunity to contribute to society just through sharing their stories and what they've gone through? Thank you all very much.